They're twisting the text. They are trying to conceal its true meaning. We've heard, but their edits are shallow. The truth will out someday.
Peace of the Lord to all of you. Welcome. So, Mahmad or Muhammad, that argument is still raging on. And by popular request, we're going to discuss today the Muhammad verses in the Quran. It is something that you may have seen on the channel before, because I have spoken about it a number of times. But as always, there is more stuff, more links, and a lot of things that actually strengthen the case quite a bit. So even if you have watched this argument before, you will be very glad to see what other stuff we have for you today. So at the end, or as we're going through, we're going to as well be discussing the whole point of, is there even a point? Does it matter whether those verses in the Quran were originally read as Mahmad, as Mahmud, as Muhammad, or something else? Does it even matter? Or are we just wasting our time, and why is it upsetting people? So we need to actually cover those bases, and we will do that as we go along. So without further ado, let's get stuck in. So probably most of you, if you're watching this, then you are obviously following Jay Smith, Mel, and everybody else. So Jay Smith, in his recent video, this one up here, he said that he's actually stepping away from the argument to do with Mahmad instead of Muhammad, and leaving it to the people who make the claim, which in this case is most likely going to be Mel, and I think it's pretty much just Mel. So that is, well, actually not necessarily, we might actually have something else later, but that actually makes perfect sense, that when something becomes, like, say, this toxic, is like, okay, instead of just pushing for something that is being debated, let's actually step back from it, let people battle it out, and then let's see what comes out as a result. We saw something similar with for example, the Petra thesis. Like, at one point, the Petra thesis was the thesis, and everybody was incredibly happy with it. And then a little while later, people started to really fight over it. Most people then stopped talking about the Petra thesis and let people just continue until something comes out of it. So this is absolutely normal. But as we go through, we'll see why, or why this argument is actually still being considered, and what is the point, where does it come from, and all of those things. But okay, let's carry on. Um, for me, this is not something I'm going to discuss in detail today, but hopefully soon I will have a show with our friend Norman, where we will show both of us how we went from whatever belief we had, in my case being complete atheist, and then starting to read the Quran and believing in the narrative, except for Muhammad being a prophet, and then actually moving towards, no, this guy actually didn't exist at all, and he had like a different arc coming from a Sunni background and reaching the same conclusion. So we will speak about that when the time comes in detail, but now I will say that these were two videos that really, really shook me. At that time, I was very confused by the narrative, because I realized that it didn't make any sense. The way that they describe Muhammad in the narrative is, nobody would have followed this guy. There is no way. Everybody the Sahaba, they are not trustworthy. The whole thing just is nonsense. And when you find out the things that were meant to happen, like, for example, at the Battle of Badr and stuff, it doesn't make any sense. Certainly not in the 7th century. There are just too many holes. So I was very, very confused. And then I came across these videos. They probably have more. These ones were in Jay Smith's channel. And the one thing that really got my attention immediately, I can't remember if it was one of these or others, but you can go there and watch them all, is about the 4 Quranic references of Muhammad. That was an eye opener, because I didn't know. I had been studying Islam for a while, and I had no idea that Muhammad was mentioned only 4 times. So I did what any sensible person would do. I went to ChatGPT and I asked, hey, ChatGPT, how many verses in the Quran are about Muhammad? And it replied something like, ooh, many hundreds. And without going back to the video, I thought, no, hang on a minute. Why are they saying four? So I went back to ChatGPT and I reworded the question. I said, no, how many times is he mentioned by name? And the moment that ChatGPT said four times, well, five if you count Ahmad, that was one big penny drop moment for me. Was okay, he's not there. This guy, I have read now lots of hadiths, lots of tafsir, a lot of the Sirah. This guy is described as a megalomaniac, okay, and as a narcissist at the very least. He would insert his name hundreds and hundreds of times. So if it's only four times, he's actually not there. Then I followed through the arguments that they put forward, and I still thought that no, there is no way, not in a million years, that this has anything to do with Jesus. So I took the verses, I analyzed them myself manually, and lo and behold, that's actually what it means. And we're going to cover that today. And you decide. So, four verses only. Surah 3, verse 144, we have him there. Also, Surah 33, 40, 47, 2, and 48, 29. We're not discussing the Ahmad one, or it's a different kind of worms, and it doesn't matter. It's paraclete. So, four verses only. In case that you have heard from some people out there something like, oh, the fact that Muhammad is only mentioned four times, that doesn't mean anything, is like, no. I have heard that, and it's something that has actually really upset me. The fact that the name only appears four times, you don't get to dismiss it offhand. Absolutely no way. And if anybody tells you otherwise, stop listening to that fool. That is not how life works. The guy is described in the traditions as the sort of guy who would write his name everywhere in the book. That is just how he is described. His character would be like that. Okay? Not only that, we would know everything about him. We would know his family, his friends, his everything, every single detail about his life would be on this book. Come on, the leader of a cult and doesn't write anything about himself only four times. And for those who say, oh no, but he just wanted to sell to the people that he was the messenger, the messenger, the messenger. Well, that goes out of the window. We have discussed plenty of verses in the Quran which is talking about Allah and his messenger. And the messenger is very clearly Jesus. We've seen plenty of those. The most obvious one is Surah 7, 157 and 158. Very basic. They are describing Jesus to a T, but it says messenger, and everybody goes, well, that's Muhammad. And it's like, no, it's not. Just read the verse. They are all about Jesus. We've seen Surah 58, verse 22, where those who follow Allah and his messenger, they get the spirit. They get the spirit. It's like, yeah, that's Jesus again. Okay. And all of the other verses, which I think probably we've reached now like near 50, I think, on individual verses. And there's going to be a lot more that is coming out now. So make sure that you stay tuned for that, because next year we're going to unpack every single verse that we've already discussed in a lot more detail. We're going to be showing tafsirs, reliance of the traveler if applicable, al-Tabari, the whole thing. And it is an absolute mess. And it's going to be as well a lot of fun. So make sure that if you are not subscribed yet, please subscribe and stay tuned for those, because it's going to be quite earth shattering, if I may say so myself. So let's go with the verses. First, a little bit of history. We are told that this is what Christendom looked in just 100 years before Islam. Now, people get upset sometimes if I show this map. This is just about the most conservative map that you can find online if you type in Christendom 7th century. These were the actual, say, countries that they had. Everybody was Christian, but the Christianity had spread a lot more. We know that they had built even churches like in China, and basically they had gone everywhere, but they wouldn't be, say, the dominant. In those countries, there were pretty much Christianity was beyond common. But we have this huge gap here. You will not find a single map out there that says that 100 years before Islam there was any Christianity in here. Okay? None of that is true. All of that region had been Christianized. And by Christianized, it doesn't mean it was a whole Christian country. It means those people knew everything. There were already too many Christians, basically. We have found a church buried in the sand in here. Najran was full of Christian heresies as well, but the whole thing, we know the whole region had been Judaized and then it was Christianized. The kingdom of the south was Christian. Basically, the narrative, the only reason that the map appears like this is because the Quran says that it was pagan and the tradition says it was pagan. But they had to do that in order to make the Quran sort of make sense. But this was what it really looked like. And to those people, you couldn't say, hey, guys, believe in me, I'm in the Torah and the Injil. And those people would not be aware that that's not the case. Or they would hear, Mary, a sister of Aaron. They would know that this guy has no idea what he's talking about. And it wouldn't be a few people here and there. It would be common knowledge. Okay. And then when we actually just move forward to what happened 100 years after this, so basically when Islam is getting to the Umayyads, we get this map. And as you can see, as you can appreciate, they're pretty much the same. Oh, something has happened. I chose the wrong map. I do apologize. Okay. But you see, the lands were pretty much the same. So this new empire replaced the Christian lands, like for the most part. For the most part, all of that was Christian or at least very, very Christianized. You would not get away with someone appearing and saying, hey, trust me, I'm the seal of the prophets. The people in those lands, they have traditions, they have churches. They're not going to believe a guy who comes with absolutely no proofs. Remember, things like the myth about the moon split, that appears hundreds of years after the time of Muhammad. No one discusses that one outside of the narrative from independent sources until much excuse me. So nobody discussed that story from independent sources outside of the narrative. Even John of Damascus doesn't talk about that, and Leo III, and there is no people. They are not playing that card, which is very dodgy. If you disagree with that, and you know of early sources that are not Islamic, because the whole point here is like all of the Islamic sources were fabricated. If you are aware of any sources that discuss things like the moon split very early on, let me have them because so far I have not been able to find them. So these people were very, very familiar as to what was going on. Now, why is this relevant to the whole Mahmad thing? Is, well, we've been told that all of these people, in almost no time, they actually jumped to the bandwagon to believing in a guy whose name was Muhammad, who is in this book, which now we're unpicking, and it tells a very different story. That guy was so incredibly important that his name appears even on coins. He's supposed to be a religious figure. Remember, this is not like Charlemagne. This is not military leader or anything of the sort. This is supposed to be religious figure from the Abrahamic faith who had no miracles whatsoever, and one book that no one could even read and copied pretty much everything, all of their traditions from the Christians and Jews. Nobody would believe in this guy. His name would not be on the coins. Why? Why would we have an inscription near the end of the 7th century that says, oh, please, Muhammad, intercede for us on the day of judgment, or something like that? It's like, according to Islam, that is shirk. Even not according to Islam, no one would say those words if he's just a man. So he's meant to be an actual messenger, right? But he had no miracles. There is no way they would believe in him. That then opens the possibility. Were they still believing in Jesus, but that is one of the names that they used for him. And it went in that direction. They started to confuse. They start basically with a Jesus figure. They're actually following Jesus. The guy that conquers all of this land is a warlord, and then they start merging the two, and the warlord comes out on top, something along those lines. So Let's go with the verses. Surah 344. We're gonna look at if the animation works here. Mistranslations, as usual, because it's always fun, and also parallels with Jesus. So let's go. So this is the verse, Surah 344, is the one that says, Muhammad is not but a messenger. Messengers have passed on before him. Let me have a look at what is happening after that. Just looking at the animations. Okay, so oddly enough, even before we talk about this verse, or we address this verse, because we're going to look at a parallel. In order to look at a parallel, we're going to see a very obvious one, which we've discussed a lot on this channel. That is when we compare two verses, Surah 157, 157 and 355, okay? So we're not going through this argument, we're just showing the parallel that is relevant here. So we have Surah 757 is talking about the messenger, right? Okay. In here, that verse tells you very clearly that those who follow the messenger and the light which was sent down with him, all of that, okay, that guy, those are the successful. In Surah 355, we have a very similar expression, right? Is right there. Okay, so let's remove that. So as you can see, we have a similar expression. And we know it's Jesus. Allah says, oh, Jesus, I will make those who follow you superior to those who disbelieve until the day of resurrection. Okay, so this is what Allah is saying. And then here he's saying, follow the messenger. Of course, the messenger is Jesus. And that's not the only parallel. By the way, I have already unpacked a lot of that in like for the new year. So in the new year, stay tuned for that. I have looked at the hadiths, at the tafsir, particularly tafsir, as to how they try to explain this away. It is hilarious, but it's also very annoying. So make sure that you actually catch those, and you will see the mental gymnastics that they have to do to explain away that following Jesus were actually the Muslims. In fact, I'll just tell you. So there are tafsir writers who will say that in the beginning, when Jesus was around, or right after, there were basically Christians, Nestorians, and Muslims. And the Christians and the Nestorians unalived all of the Muslims until the time of Muhammad, when the Muslims started to appear. And it's like, they don't even realize that that contradicts this verse. It means that it's going to be, the whole thing is a mess. The whole thing is a mess. Make sure that you actually catch those. All of the tafsir writers just contradict each other. It's hilarious. You will see. Okay, another parallel. Still on 7157, and now we're going to look at Surah 350. It's talking about the messenger, and Surah 350, this is Jesus. In here it says, I have come, is because the previous verse is Jesus speaking, confirming what was before me of the Torah and so on. So you can actually go, there is no discussion about this. This is Jesus according to the verses before and after under tafsir. So there is no question about it, okay? But these verses, both of them, they have another thing in common. Both of them, they say that this guy, so Jesus, came to make things lawful and unlawful. In Surah 757, we have the same action, making things lawful and then prohibiting the evil. It would be like what? Haram, I suppose. It is Jesus in both cases. We have been told now so many times, no, it's only Allah that can do things, make things lawful and unlawful, and the messenger is the one that passes on the message, right? It's kind of like his job. But the verses don't say that. It says that he is the one that makes things lawful and unlawful. And according to the traditions, they will say that here we have Jesus and here we have Muhammad. That's not the case. It's the same structure. And remember, we have just seen that even the ending of Surah 757 is the same as Surah 355. Those will be the successful, the uppermost until the day of judgment. These parallels, they are going to give us a lot of clues in a minute when we're looking at Muhammad. There is, I'm happy to be corrected if there is any other places in the Quran where any other person is making things lawful and unlawful. I'm aware that there are, I think, a verse or two that says, oh, those people were making things lawful and unlawful when Allah didn't want to. Okay? No, those are the bad guys. That they didn't really make anything lawful and unlawful. It's very clear. These ones are clear. In both cases, Jesus makes things lawful and unlawful. Christians, no problem with that. Muslims, huge problem. The expression only appears twice, and that is something that helps us understand the meaning of the verse and who, in this case, the messenger was. Right. So we're going to do exactly the same thing because we're going back to Surah 3, verse 144, and we're going to compare that with 575. These two, so they are, Surah 344 is one of the ones about Muhammad, and the other one is about Jesus. The expression that comes immediately after only appears twice in the Quran. Probably you have heard this just the other day from the last video, one of the last videos from Mel. He actually mentioned this. He has mentioned this before. Odon, I can't remember the video, I can't remember when, but I think I've seen in one of the presentations from Odon Lafontaine speaking about this. This is not a secret. This has been out for a while, guys. This expression only appears twice in the Quran, right? And remember, we have seen already a case where the same expression appears twice, and we can link them to show, okay, here is Jesus. Jesus is also over here. And the whole description of the verse is about Jesus. The same thing happens here, okay? This expression only appears twice in the whole Quran. And lo and behold, one of them, it is very clear, it says so right there, is Jesus. And then on the other one, oh no, in the other one, trust me, bro, the messenger in there, Muhammad, it's Muhammad. So we have the same attribute for Jesus and Muhammad. It's like, well, no, okay? We've seen these sort of parallels before. And we've seen how the title messenger was simply another title for Jesus. With Muhammad, okay, well, we will get there. We'll keep exploring, okay? So, the same expression twice. Just think about it. I know it's very easy to dismiss this. Well, it's the Abrahamic faith, and they say that Jesus is a messenger. So they are saying that Jesus did something, and so did Muhammad. We wouldn't have a problem with that. But just think about the sheer insanity of this. Exactly the same structure in both cases, but we're not done yet. In here, these two sentences, in the Arabic, they are nominal sentences. Nominal sentences in Arabic means there is no verb. It's like when you say Muhammad Rasul Allah, the translation is Muhammad Messenger Allah. There is no is, like in English, okay? In Arabic, you don't need, you have these things called nominal sentences. You don't need a verb because it is implied. But notice how, even though they are both identical, in one of them, Sahih International, for instance, will translate when it's about Jesus in the past tense. When it comes to Muhammad, he will say, no, this is the present tense because it is Muhammad speaking, right? This is him shoehorning to the audience how they need to read this verse. This is not on. By doing so, now you have Jesus in the past, and now you have Muhammad in the present. But we're going to look at all the other verses that mention Muhammad, and we're going to see that two of them are in the past tense. So how would he know if this was meant to be read as a past tense? Or both of them are supposed to be read basically in the present because his nominal sentence is like tenseless, is like, is forever, you know, is always and forever the messenger of God, something like that. But you see how we get very confused in the English? Well, this is not the end of it, because look at this. So, if he was to die or be killed, is that what it says? Think about this now for a minute. So just think about this, and please really pay attention to this. The Quran is using here an absolute word-for-word parallel between Jesus and Muhammad, right? Exactly the same expression. It only appears twice in the Quran. It never talks like this about Moses or anybody else, just these two verses. Okay, that's a very important clue. Remember, the whole thing with the Mahmad argument is that this was something to do with Jesus, right? We'll get there. And what comes immediately after is if he was to die or be killed, it's like, hang on a minute. Why, out of all of the topics that you can attach to the verses that mention Muhammad by name, you would have that? If he was to die or be killed, have you not heard the Christian Prince making fun of this, saying, if he was to die or be killed, is there a third option? Why would you say that? Don't you feel that that is very clunky? But this is where things get interesting. This expression here, this conversation, is being had in the Quran. This is being discussed in the Quran about Jesus. What does Surah 457, I think it is, say? The Jews say, we have killed Jesus, but they didn't kill him. It resembled to them. The conversation about whether he was killed or not is being had. And about dying, we have it as well. Surah 355 is saying, Allah saying to Isa, I will cause you to die. And Surah 517 says, you caused me to die. One verse pre-crucifixion, another verse post-crucifixion. And the one that every Muslim knows, no, they didn't kill him. And then when we get to Muhammad, we have the same conversation here. So if he was to die or be killed, would you turn? Are you not seeing the parallels? The parallel doesn't end with this sentence. It's only the beginning. I hope you're saying this. Please let me know in the comment section below. Are you saying this, or do I need to actually use a different expression or put more verses on the screen? Don't want to overwhelm you. Just please do let me know. Your guidance is very much appreciated. Okay, this is how it is translated by all of the translators. I'm going to go very, very quickly through them. How they translate it normally like this. So what if he dies or is killed? If he dies or is slain? Basically present. But actually, by the way, the Arabic is not in present, it's past tense. So this one here, well, in corpus, he almost get it right. So if he died or is slain, it doesn't say is slain, is or was killed. It's the same expression. We continue, they get it wrong, they get it wrong, they get it all wrong because they are like that, they get it wrong. And then by the time that we get to Yusuf Ali, which is very interesting, if he died or were slain, will you turn back on your heels? The literal translation from Grok, from Chat GPT. So then, is it that if he died or was killed, you turn back upon your heels? Actually, haven't checked the turn back. I thought actually that one is in nominal or imperfect, but I don't know. It looks here that ChatGPT said that it is perfect tense. Anyway, but you can see this is mistranslated, just like we've seen in so many other verses before. And when all of the translators get the tense wrong, you know there is a problem. You know they are trying to hide something. If all of this, you have a parallel statement that is mentioned only once in the Quran about Jesus, and then is talking in the past tense about that person dying or being killed, there is an or. It's like they are not sure. So if he died or was killed, what happens in the Quran? They don't know. There are verses that says that he died, and in one verse it says that they didn't kill him, but it looked like they killed him. See, the conversation is being had. This was never meant to be Muhammad. Now, we'll get as to why does it actually say Muhammad, but in a bit. Let's continue. So 3340, let's have a look. We're going to see mistranslations and once again, parallel with Jesus. So this is the verse, is the one about not being the father of any of your men. So from the offset, wrong tense. This one is now not a nominal sentence. You know, like we said before, like Muhammad, Rasul, Allah, that is a nominal sentence. This one is not. So kana, this is past tense. Now we have here Muhammad is, in the past tense. Muhammad was not the father of any of your men, but the messenger of Allah and the last of the prophets, and so on. Now, why would you get this tense wrong? For any of the friendly trolls, which now they seem to think that joining these discussions by saying, ha 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 ha, let me show you, even Kathir, that you are doing something, you are not. Okay? On this channel, we have actually shown already quite a lot, and next year there is more coming out. The tafsirs, they are all trying to come up with any possible explanation that pushes the narrative and denies what is written. And we have those ones in the hundreds. Okay? So don't bother, please, for everyone's safety, to share that nonsense like the tafsirs and go, look, you see, you've been refuted by even Kathir. We don't do that nonsense here. Okay? And the magical Arabic also do not do that. It really annoys me when somebody says, but it's magical. You know, when you have the past tense next to Muhammad, it's present tense because it's magic. Is please shut up. That really hurts. Okay. This is past tense. This is talking about Muhammad in the past tense, but you cannot see that because otherwise it breaks the illusion. So what happens when we go to the translators? Present tense, present tense. There you go, present, present, present. Did anyone get it right on this one? Nope, nope. Not even Yusuf Ali. Present tense. Anyone says, but that's actually what it means. Okay, fine. Do the same exercise with Surah 355 and see two translators saying that Jesus dies and the other ones lying about it. So even these ones, we take it with a pinch of salt. So they're getting everything wrong and on purpose. Now, something interesting, because we're looking as well at parallels. If we look, so that one was Surah 33:40, the previous one. Let's actually just look at it again. And actually, let me just check the next slides, because I had so many on these ones. I'm going to just wing it. So notice as well, in the previous one that we had discussed, it is actually acknowledging or discussing the whole thing about Muhammad, whether he dies or was killed, or would you turn on your heels? It's like that makes perfect sense with Jesus because they are having this discussion even within the Quran. We're having the discussion and the confusion. When we get to this verse, we have something as well interesting. He was not the father of any of your men. Now, if instead of Muhammad in here, if it said Jesus, just think about that for a minute. Jesus was not the father of any of your men, but the messenger of God and the seal of the prophets. What would you interpret immediately? Jesus was not married. He didn't have any kids. Famously, he didn't. And also, he was the messenger of God. He's literally the word of God according to the Quran, right? You don't get any bigger messenger than the actual word of God himself. And the seal of the prophets, which I'm still trying to find the reference. ChatGPT keeps telling me that Saint Ephraim used this term, but I haven't actually found it yet. So I'm looking for it. But anyway, if this was about Jesus, is he the seal of the prophets? Every single Christian would tell you yes. Even Jordan Peterson says Jesus is the embodiment of the law and the prophet. Okay, so we wouldn't have a problem with this sentence at all. In Islam, first they try to tell you that this is not past tense, and then they tell you that the thing about not being the father of any of their men, it was a temporary thing, because at that point in time he had kids who had died, and then he had other kids later. But at this particular point, he was not the father of any government. Actually, I need to look at the tafsirs for this one. I'm sure it's going to be fun. Once again, just replace Muhammad with Jesus and put the correct tense and read the sentence. Would it make more sense than when it comes to Islam? You know the answer? Okay, So now let's look at parallels. So that was 3340. We're going to look at what it says in 41, 42, and 43. So I try not to actually look at too much of the context with the verses, because very often you will have words in there that are grossly mistranslated, and the moment you start saying that word doesn't mean that in Arabic or something like that, you're actually just losing everybody. So I'm trying to take the verses as they stand. But this one is interesting. So when we get to Surah, to this couple of verses after, it has this expression here. So exalt him morning and afternoon. The last person that was mentioned here was Allah. So it says the thing about Muhammad, and then all you who have believed, remember Allah with much remembrance. And then, and exalt him morning and afternoon. Did you know that this expression appears one other time in the Quran? And did you know that we have discussed that one quite a few times in the last couple of months? This one right here. In Surah 48, verse 9, which I have made a lot of fun out of this one, they translated, Sahih International, that you may believe in Allah and His Messenger. So you're supposed to stop in there, and then, and honor Him and respect the Prophet and exalt Allah. Look at, it doesn't say the Prophet and it doesn't say Allah. There are three words: honor Him, respect Him, and exalt Him. And the last noun used is the messenger. We know those things are not there. They are not in the Arabic. So these would very clearly be understood once again about being about Jesus, that you may believe in Allah and His messenger, Jesus, and honor Him. Because of Arabic, that would mean the messenger. And they know that because honor Him and respect Him, they attach that to the messenger. But by the time that it gets to exalt, they cannot do it, because you cannot exalt a person. It can only be about Allah. So that's why you get to the tafsir and they will tell you, no, 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 that's, they break all of the Arabic rules and they go from honor, respect, and exalt the messenger to honor and respect, well, the messenger, and then you just break it up and says, and then exalt, it has to be Allah. Okay? But it is curious that this verse here, which we already unpacked many times, or a few times at least, that's the problem. That's what they are trying to hide, that you are meant to honor the messenger. Of course, you could actually argue that this was the original guy saying these things, and then when they are inventing the religion much later, they realize that is shirk, but that's pretty much not the case. But anyway, one could actually argue that one. But once you unpack enough, you realize that the messenger is referring to Jesus, as we have seen in Surah 757 and all of that good stuff. Okay? So the same expression in here about what you need to do, and in here it was the messenger. In this one is about Allah, right? Which of course helps the exegete to say, okay, so that part of the sentence should be about Allah, except that it breaks the rules, which actually got me thinking, as you can see. So this appears only twice. And once again, one of them is very clearly about Jesus in a very clear book, in very clear Arabic. So, okay, actually, I thought it was the other one. I'm going to come back to that in just a second. And then after that, so this is saying about exalting Allah, right? Morning and afternoon. In the previous verse that we've seen in the previous slide is the messenger. This same expression was about exalting the messenger, unless you break every single Arabic rule. And we are not doing that here. But look at how it continues. It is He, so now is Allah. But look at this, who blesses you and His angels and so on. This is one of these very dodgy verses that Christian apologists, some, they actually like to use a lot, because it's when they have salat, and which always means pray, pray, pray. But when it comes to Allah, and it says that He prays, they change it and it's like, no, He gives blessings. And I've heard this one from so many. The ones that actually spring to mind is Giant Daughter of Christ, because they used once on a show I was watching the Corpus Quran concordance and say, look, in here it always means pray. But when it comes to Allah, as if by magic, it means praying, which actually then makes me think, if this expression in the previous verse, we've seen it elsewhere, and it was about the messenger, and it was about Jesus. And then we get here for some odd reason, and he is the one who prays. It's like, I don't know, did these people have this um, weird belief that maybe Jesus is in heaven and he's praying for you? When he was on earth, he was certainly praying to the Father, mm, but is he praying? Is he praying to the Father for us? I don't know. Maybe that's actually a very deep theological question. But you see where I'm going with this. If Surah 33:40 is actually talking or is supposed to be about Muhammad, which we have seen that it is not, then we get to this verse, which is a little bit odd. It implies it's all going to be about Allah. But then the next two, they would make more sense to do with Jesus. It makes me think whether there is a problem with this sentence here. And that's not something that I have the skills to even begin doing. So if you have the skills to try to understand this and to see if something dodgy is going on, and this was meant to be something to do like a big title for Jesus, not like Rasulullah, but something weird, then let me know. You see how it appears? So you will have Allah, and then you will have these two words. This actually reminds me of, for example, particularly in Surah 4, you get this quite a bit, where it would end with these formulas. Allah, the accepting of repentance, although Murad translates it very differently, and merciful. And also, and Allah is ever knowing and wise. So the name Allah, and then you have two things, two little things. So I do wonder if you know where I'm coming from, whether this would have been the previous verse about Jesus, this one they have to play maybe with the diacritics to come up with something that now forces you to read that this is about Allah. Then you have no problem exalting him, and then he blesses people for some reason, but you know, but he doesn't because he prays according to the Arabic. You know what I mean? Simply because the previous verse is talking about Jesus. This one here is used once before, and it is about Jesus. And we do have attestations of Jesus praying, which would make more sense than these people thinking that Allah prays, right? So anyway, this is not within my expertise to be able to do, but if this is something that you are able to do because you speak Arabic, maybe even Syriac or something like this, let me know. I would be interested to know if maybe they have played with this a little bit. So, and an extra bonus, that same expression, or not the same, but similar-ish, is appears in only one other place in the Quran, Surah 76:25, when it says, and mention, or rather remember. The word there is remember, and remember the name of your Lord morning and evening. If you guys manage to help us figure out this thing here, that could be a big clue. We would have 33:40 being about Jesus. This would still be about Jesus. In here, it would be about exalting him, which we have it in that other verse that we've seen, whichever actually it was. Okay, let's just show this one, 48:9. I keep forgetting. So they might all be related by looking at a parallel statement. This one is about the messenger, and then this one turns out to be about the messenger, and we get to 76:25, and it's very clearly telling you to remember the name of your Lord morning and evening, and then the Lord would be Jesus, and that's why they try to hide it. But anyway, so bonus round, if you have the skills to try to figure any of these things out, please give it a go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. So, Surah 47, verse 2. Oh boy. So, now things get interesting. We're going to look at mistranslations and parallels with Jesus. First, we are going to start with the verse just before it, because the one that mentions Muhammad is 47:2, So let's just begin with 47.1, just to establish a little bit of a theme. So this is the Arabic, and here are all of the translations. The ones in red are mistranslated. This is a theme now. The ones in green, they are basically, I consider them to be passable. At least they didn't just change the tense completely. They will still play a little bit, like this one is supposed to be perfect tense. So, those who are, it's like those who were faithless and barred from the way of Allah, he rendered them their works fruitless. That would be a better rendering, but strictly speaking, perfect tense in Arabic, fine, he has rendered. It still implies something more in the past. Okay, so that's why I give it a pass. But most of you watching, you are probably not going to be as kind and polite as I am, and would say, and you would not give it a pass. But I'm giving it a pass. So, Amjad Khan, Allah has destroyed the deeds of those who disbelieved and prevented from Allah's way. You will notice how many of these translations, they are going to use even the future tense. Arbery, those who disbelieve and bar from God's way, now is talking to the present people. God will send their works astray. Literally not what it says. This is telling a story in the past tense, not giving a command to the believers and then saying that God will punish them. None of that is in the Arabic. It's telling past tense story, as we will see in the next verse when we talk about Muhammad. Again, Hilali Khan, wrong. Maududi, Allah has caused. Yeah, I'll give it a pass. And Muhammad Sarwar, God has made devoid of all virtue the deeds of those who have disbelieved, okay, and prevented others, okay, yeah, okay. And the other one's wrong, 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 wrong. Okay, and then the end, wrong, 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 wrong. When we get to actually Murad, so I have shown here both verses. You see he will just actually use the tenses as they are meant to be, which is past tense. He will use something like has been, fine, but past tense, everything is very clearly in the past tense, not what translators will make you believe by making it sound very present-ish and very future-ish. Future-ish. That's a difficult word I've just made up. Okay, cool. So, rendering with as well ChatGPT, like as literal as it could give me. Those who disbelieved and who turned away from others, turned away from the path of God, he caused their deeds to go astray. Past tense. So this is talking about past tense. Remember that? Okay. Now with the verse of Muhammad, we have the same thing. The previous verse is all in the past tense. It's talking about something that already happened. But you see how they try to deceive, they're putting everything present and future. When we get to the verse about Muhammad, we get exactly the same thing. Just looking at the literal translation, believed and performed righteous deeds, and believed was sent down. He expiated, set right, past tense, past tense, past tense. Why do we have 4 verses in the Quran that mention Muhammad and 2 of them are in the past tense? Are you joining the dots? So that's why when someone tells you, no, the fact that Muhammad is mentioned 4 times, nah, that's don't think about it, bro. That's just that doesn't prove anything. Yeah, they are not the good guys. Okay? This is one of the most important clues to the whole jigsaw puzzle. So when they tell you those things don't matter, that's when you have to investigate in these things. Okay? Those are not, they're just absolutely wrong to say the least. Okay, so translations. Who gets it right? Who gets it wrong? I should do an episode just called that. Who gets it right? Who gets it wrong? So as usual, red is wrong, wrong. Amjad Khan. And those who accepted faith and did good deeds and believed in what has been sent down. You know, as I said, I'll give it a pass. You'll probably disagree with me and be more strict, but yeah, I like it. Good Amhat Khan there. Allah has relieved them of some of their evils and refined them. Allah, Allah, do you remember seeing Allah in the verse? I don't remember seeing Allah in the verse. Hmm? He will remove them. He expiated. There is no Allah. Okay, that's why I didn't put Allah there in the green. He didn't use brackets. Notice that as well. So that's bad. I should change the color actually. Yes, because of that one. Amhad Khan, you've let the team down. So the tenses he's getting right, and then he's shoehorning there Allah. Like, why are you doing that? And you will see Sam Arbery here. He will acquit them of their evil deeds. Are you sure? Are you really sure? Future tense, they like their future tense when it's about Allah, even though Allah is not there. They say Maududi probably he has also Allah in here, so probably he was copying from the previous guy, because the other ones don't normally insert Allah. They just say he. Anyway, so past tense, and then all of these ones get it very wrong. Muhammad Sarwar, I can't remember. I think probably put it like this, like the whole verse. I think he's the one who doesn't translate things at all, like literally. He just basically tells you a different story. Like he just, it's like he's getting the meaning and then he's writing it with his own words, so nothing matches. You cannot do a word for word translation. I can't remember if it was him, maybe somebody else, but on this one, yeah, he has gone full freestyle. Super cool. And then this one's wrong. Talalitani was sent down, gets a little 1 mark in there. A for effort. Okay, cool. So that's what we have seen. Actually, let's just stay in this one. 4 verses in the Quran mention Muhammad, 2 in the past tense. Join the bloody dots. He's not there. It's telling the story of somebody in the past tense. Okay? Like, I don't know why this is, like, why people are arguing this point. It says, no, but that doesn't mean, it means everything. 4 times when he's described in the traditions as a narcissist, he's mentioned 4 times. Okay, he's not there. He's never been there. And then you go 2 of them in the past tense, and then you see all of these lies. This sort of lies with the translations, we find it even in the Arabic when they tell Muslims that mutawafika means something else. We have it in the tafsirs. We're going to see a lot of that next year. So everything in the past tense. So you're getting this. Remember, everything that we're discussing here is because of the whole Muhammad Mahmad argument. Okay? And we're getting there. Like, why is that important? Because this Muhammad is not the guy in the traditions. Whoever this Muhammad is someone in the past tense, is someone who is paralleled with Jesus already quite a few times that we've seen today. So who could this Muhammad be? Why is he not mentioned by name in more other places? And so on. And when we look at the descriptions, they seem to be describing Jesus. So if it is Jesus, that's when we get to, okay, was the MHMD the one in the coins? Because that would make sense. He's the one in the book. But let's continue. Let's finalize this verse. Notice this. So something is sent down upon Muhammad. Okay? Which is interesting to say the least. So, considering everything that we have discussed so far, we have seen parallels with Jesus in every single verse. That, of course, lots of people are, no, it's just Muhammad is trying to make himself sound like, it's like, yeah, but we've also shown plenty of verses that would not, they would not sell. Like 7157, the one in the Torah and the Injil. It's like these people are Christianized. This guy is not in the Torah and the Injil. He would never have been sold. He would never been able to sell himself as being there. It's nonsense. But when you keep reading, you see that it's all about Jesus. So after everything that we have discussed, when then we get to this verse, when we are talking about Muhammad, which we are questioning as to whether he somehow was a reference to Jesus. And it says that something in the past tense was sent down upon him. Like, it shouldn't be this difficult at this point. What do you think makes more sense after everything that we have seen? That this is a cult to and believe. This is saying that those people, so those people who believed in what was sent down upon Muhammad, if that's the spirit being sent upon Jesus on baptism, people need to believe by the Spirit. Have you heard that expression before? Believe by the Spirit. The Quran believes in that. There is a verse out of the 6 verses that talk about Sakina, Shekinah, before they try to hide it. It says, God sent down his Shekinah to increase the believers in belief. I don't think tranquility does that to you, but in this text, it is another call to the Spirit. What do you think would make more sense? Just think about it if this is the Quran. Those who believed, actually in the past tense, in the Quran, which was sent down upon Muhammad, that is weird. At no point this expression would make sense. Not during the time of Muhammad, because the Quran was never sent in the past tense. It was always partially sent. Hmm? And in here, it doesn't qualify. It doesn't say, and believed in how, in what parts of the Quran have been sent, in the surahs that have been sent. It's talking about something descending and upon Muhammad. What are we? Do you know how you have to qualify this? You have to say, no, he had it in his soul, like Rashad Khalifa says, he was given the whole Quran upon his soul, but then it was released one verse at a time. Jibril made him remember. All of that nonsense. All of that is just made so that you don't read what it says. Hmm? So believed in what was sent down. What was sent down? The Quran. Okay, but the Quran was being sent down. This is not correctly described. If it was the Quran, they would use another expression. But that is where it gets interesting as well, even more. Because right after that, so the sentence ends there, and then we have wa huwa, and it's like, and he or it. That is always translated as it, right? Which it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense based on the context, but the reason it makes sense translating this as it is because we have heard this a million times. I have read this in this manner for years in the plural. So, and in English, yeah, believe in what was sent down upon Muhammad, believe in that thing is the truth. But according to Arabic grammar, and we have lots of places in the Quran when you have something, anything at all, and the moment that it says and he or and huwa, it refers to this thing that was immediately before. That happens a lot in the Quran. It's normal in Arabic. If I get this wrong and you are not a Muslim, leave me a comment in the comment section below and correct me. If you're a Muslim, no, I know what you are going to say. You're going to say that this rendering is right. Because you haven't listened to a single word that I have said today. And you are flicking through the books of Ibn Kathir, who appeared 700 years after the time of Muhammad. So, no, don't want that. But, so if this huwa in Arabic is, in English is it or he, is the same. It's just, you need to know by the context, which means it is perfectly plausible that this is not talking about that it. Imagine that the verse actually broke up there. And believe by this and do righteous things and believe by what was sent down upon Muhammad, comma. And he is the truth from their Lord. It's like, okay, so Muhammad is Jesus. called the truth. Very, very common name for him, title, right? And how does it continue? He, so now we would actually be talking, would the he be their Lord? Okay, their Lord basically removed their sins and so on, relieved their evils and set them on a straight path. Okay, so this he, yeah, could be the Lord, and that would be the Father. Could there be something else? That in here it is in fact it, and it is the truth, is calling that thing which was sent down and being the Spirit, and it is sent down from their Lord, could be the word, from their Lord, and their Lord is still a call to Jesus. He removed their sins. So who did they believe in here? That the original writers, of course, not Islam, which appears hundreds of years later. Who did the original guys who wrote this, who did they believe removed sins? Was it the Father or the Son? Was it Jesus or was it Allah, the Godhead, the Father? Who was it? Hmm? But notice how in this sentence in here, which sticks out like a sore thumb, we have all of these bits and pieces that sound very Christological. Parallels with Jesus, which you can actually draw in just pretty much every single way. But the most important clue, the whole thing is in the past tense. This story is saying people who got their evils removed and they were set the right way in the past tense. And the whole thing about the Quran being sent down upon Muhammad makes zero sense. And remember everything that we've discussed before today and in other shows. So 4829. So this one I'm not going to discuss in detail. It will be next year when we go, we go ham on this one. But for now, we're going to keep it very, very brief, and I'm going to share a couple of other cool things, and then that will be that. Now, some odd parallels and all of the insertions in, well, you will see. So this is the verse, is the end of Surah 48. This is the only surah where Makkah is mentioned in the whole Quran. And the only thing that I'm going to actually mention on this one, as I said, we're not going to discuss this one in detail, is that once again it goes, Muhammad is the messenger of Allah, Muhammad Rasul Allah, nominal sentence, so we don't know about the tense. And then it's describing those who are with him. So in theory, that would be the Sahaba. But after a little bit, it says the description of those with him, they're in the Torah and they're in the gospel. Now, we're not going to have the discussion of, oh, but the Torah and the Injil are corrupt. We all know by now the Quran affirmed the Torah and the Injil, period. Okay, all of that thing about being corrupt is because once they start creating their religion and they're saying that the Quran is their holy book, they realize that the Torah and the Injil then contradicts everything. So they basically have to come up with an excuse, which probably appears in the 10th century with Ibn Hazm. No one cares. Okay, all cope. The Quran affirms the Torah and the Injil being being there. Okay, being not corrupt. The one verse that people go to say, well, they are corrupt, is Surah 757, because it says that Muhammad is in the Torah and the Injil. But we have discussed that now many times. It's not saying that Muhammad is in the Torah and the Injil, it's saying that Jesus is in the Torah and the Injil. Okay, so with all of that in mind, are the Sahaba, are there description of the Sahaba in the Torah and the Injil? What does that even mean? Think about it. What does it mean that their description is in the Torah and the Injil? If this is about Jesus, are the apostles described in the Torah and the Injil? Yes, they are Jews. The apostles were Jews. So they had always been going to the synagogue. They had memorized a lot of the Torah. They were circumcised, the whole shebang. They were very much described in the Torah. And in the gospel, well, yeah, their stories are there. Yeah. So it's quite interesting. And then the end of the sentence, it just has a very Christological sort of like theme. You can say actually Judeo-Christian, the whole thing with the plantation. But I think Christianity has actually just used these parallels probably more than anybody else. So it says that about those people, there is a plant which produces its offshoots and strengthens them so they grow firm and so on. Because Jesus used parallels with plants and stuff. Okay, so that sounds quite Christian, but again, we will unpack this verse in the future. Surah 48 is a very interesting one. If you just go a couple of verses before this one, is talking about the Masjid al-Haram, which of course we need to link with Surah 17, verse 1, which mentions the Masjid al-Haram, but that story is about Moses. So that's why this is not a verse that is as clear as the previous ones. We would need to go through the context and figure out some of the verses before in order to make the final conclusion on this one and saying, you see, in here is also about Jesus. But this one cannot be done without doing all of the other work and of the previous verses. And we're certainly not going to do that today. We'll do it next year. Okay. But I think we have shown enough with all of the previous verses. And by the way, I hope that you have liked that part of the breakdown. It's next year is I'm going to bring them up again and showing as well some of the hadiths and things like this. Is going to be hilarious. So make sure that you are subscribed for when that drops, which is probably going to be very early in January. So let's just finalize the whole thing and talk a little bit about Mahmad and Muhammad. These are again the 4 verses. This is a very interesting parallel, although if you are an naysayer, you will just ignore it entirely. 3 out of the 4 is making it clear that this Muhammad person is the messenger of God. Think about it. So you have hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of verses in the Quran that is talking about Allah and his messenger, Allah and his messenger. And then when they are talking about Muhammad, in this case, they have to spell it out for you that Muhammad is the messenger. It is very odd. It is very, very odd. It sticks out like a sore thumb. That 3 out of 4, they have to make it clear. It's almost like Muhammad means something very specific, and it is not this guy. Because we've unpacked the verses, they actually sound too much like Christianity. But 3 out of 4. And if we include the Ahmad verse, that makes it 4 out of 5. Now, if you go to the Quran and look at the verses that talk about prophet, as in they are supposed to be calling Muhammad as the prophet, have a look how many times it says Muhammad, the prophet, and then in those verses it says messenger. You will be surprised that it doesn't quite happen. This one is just something weird. This, I think, is what gives birth to, for example, people like John thinking maybe Muhammad is meant to be the resurrected Messiah, is the Messiah, but at a very specific point in time. Hence why, they are saying this. But anyway, there could be more to the story. It's just interesting that when we have the name Muhammad, we have verses that sound very much like Jesus. 3 of them is making it clear that he is a messenger, and we don't have other stuff that would be very useful. For example, verses that say Muhammad ibn Abdullah was going with Aisha from Mecca to Yathrib, and then nothing. Names of the Sahaba, nothing. The only name that appears that points towards them is Zayd, and Zayd means increase. So the whole thing is a mistranslation. There is no Zayd in the book. Okay, so this is how silly it is, and it is established. Jesus is always called even Miriam, and Mary, well, daughter of Imran, and so on. But when it comes to Muhammad, we don't get anything about his life, and the 4 verses, as we have just unpacked, they have lots of parallels with just basically about Jesus. So once again, just because I produced this a really long time ago, and I like to show for those who tell you, okay, I'll just stop on this one now for a second. If you hear anyone telling you, even if they're the good guys, by the way, the fact that Muhammad is mentioned only 4 times doesn't prove anything, it doesn't mean anything, and let me tell you why it is that is all halal. Okay, stay away from those people on this topic. I'm not saying they are bad people, maybe their hearts are as pure as snow. They should not get involved in this. They are not getting it. They are in a whole different universe. Okay? They're going to be throwing the tafsir book at you. You might as well just go to an imam and ask them to explain it to you. The fact that Muhammad is described in the traditions as a narcissist, and when we go to the Quran, the name appears 4 times and 2 are in the past tense, it is one of the biggest clues that we actually have. So anyone who dismisses that offhand, they have already made a conclusion, and their conclusion is false. Stay away from them on these topics. They don't know anything. They will be the last ones to get it. So that's just a little bit of a warning. Okay. Now, look at all of the times that the name Muhammad is inserted in the Quran, in Sahih International only. Every translator will add him in more places. All of these ones, these verses, they are not talking about Muhammad. They make it into Muhammad by inserting O Muhammad or something of the sort. You have them there and in red. If anything, I may have missed one or two, but I think I got all of them. And there, and you have more. And another slide, and another, and another. All of these verses, they have nothing to do with Muhammad. He was never there. For anyone who says, but lots of these verses say, like, look at this one, say, so you see it's commanding Muhammad to speak. It's like, first of all, whether it says kal, kala, or kul, when we go to the Kiraat, we see that there was confusion between say and he said. That's number one. These people didn't know. Hmm? Certainly not consistently. That's one thing. Second, if one verse says, say blah, 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 how do you know that that has something to do with Muhammad? You are shoehorning Jibril, you are shoehorning the narrative. That could very well be a writing from one preacher saying to another preacher what to say. There is no Muhammad in the verse. You are assuming that he is. And I think we have exposed enough lies for people to take those things with a pinch of salt and stop concluding that Muhammad is in the book. He is not there. And we are still going through more slides. There you go. Near the end. See, take screenshots as well if you like. Otherwise, just go to Sahih International. Type in O Muhammad. By the way, this version that you have here on the screen is available on Excel. So if you just type in on Google Quran Excel, this is the one that is going to probably appear. And if you are any good with Excel, you're able to actually do a lot of filtering. And you know, you can actually just look for Muhammad and then close off the brackets. And then you're going to have all of these just appearing and so on. So you see, have here, oh Muhammad, and we just, bam, we slap it on, and that's that. All right, so let's have then this conversation about Muhammad, Mahmad. Why are we still talking about it? And does it matter at all? So this argument and whether it matters. So the short answer is yes, of course it matters, because we have to explore absolutely everything. From where I'm standing, from my POV, I don't know. I'm not a linguist, and that's why I don't get involved in this particular fight. Also, I will just keep saying Muhammad. Why? Because I don't want to get deterred with, oh, but let's talk about that argument. It's like, no, it's not my area of expertise. What I can do is I can look at the verses, I can look at the context, I can look at those things, and like we've done today, to show it to you and say, do you see these parallels? Okay, and you can look at those parallels and I still say, no, that has nothing to do with Jesus, alhamdulillah. You can do that. Okay, this is not an argument that is used about one verse or two verses. We have shown lots and lots and lots and lots of verses already that they follow this pattern. From where I'm standing, I think in the end it will be Mahmad. That is my gut feeling. And my gut feeling doesn't come from a position of linguistics. It simply comes from a position that I have been doing this now for quite a while. And I can only see lies. The Quran is full of them. Every single thing that we have been told about this narrative, so far, I can only find lies. The origins of the book, the meanings of the book, the language of the book, the traditions, everything is a lie. It told a different story. It had a different purpose. It was a different genre. Everything is just a lie. So, after everything that I have seen, if you simply ask me, hey, do you think that the original name would have been Muhammad or Mahmad? It's like, what do Muslims say now? Muhammad? Okay, it was Mahmad. Simple as that. Because this is what I can find all the time with everything. Mm? But as I said, this is for other people to, of course, answer how it was read. Now, it's important, yes, because at the moment, every single piece of evidence is being looked at, and it should. It's the first time that this has happened. In fact, there was a little thing I was not going to show you. This is actually for another show, but it was very cool. So I'm going to just show you, which is this. Okay. So I just did a table just to show like what has happened with basically Dawa and anti-Dawa. So the Islamic narrative and those arguing against it. So what happened, this is just silly numbers, but so that you get how what is happening. So everything starts at one point. I just put those dates in there like that, and everything moved in a linear progression. And for 1400 years, the lies of the narrative have been increasing in a linear manner. Basically, there is a problem. People say, hey, why are you saying that this book is divine, but it also says that Mary was the sister of Aaron? Then they have to create some hadith that says, oh, no, that's a nice way to call Mary. And it's like, it's not. And, those people are Arabs. They know that nobody is using that terminology. If they had said, Mary, daughter of Aaron, they would have said, okay, it's from the lineage. Mary, daughter of Adam. Yes, nobody would have a problem. Lineage, everyone understands that. Mm? But sister, absolutely not. And the contemporaries would have known. So you had to really, you know, tell someone that it was a nice way to call Mary, and then you would have to threaten them with a sword. Okay. So it's been like this. It's been very reactive, and also people who wrote great amounts of tafsir. I mean, they wrote so much stuff about nothing. It's um, it's just noise. They just create that noise so that you don't ever get to the bottom of it. But then, at the same time, you would have the ones arguing against the theology, which back in the day would have been Jews and Christians when they're in a place where when they can actually have a conversation with a Muslim. And their refutals, they really don't go a long way because you might have a genius like John of Damascus in one place speaking with a handful of Muslims, but that's not going to go anywhere. They didn't have emails in those days. So whatever he's saying is not really going to go very far. He's going to go to a handful of people and then he's going to write it down. And even if he converts some people, they're probably not going to be very vocal about it. And if they are very vocal about it, they are not going to live for much longer. Okay. So this process of debating Islam from a theological angle was very unsuccessful. It would have been very, very, very slow. But then things changed. That started to change in the 1800s, basically when the Ottoman Empire is already doomed, because the Ottoman Empire collapses in 1923, well, it gets dissolved, but it was already decadent for a really long time. So at that point is when Europeans start to actually grab books and Qurans and learn Arabic. You have the first Orientalists starting to do things. And from that point is when things don't no longer continue with this linear progression. We go with an exponential progression. So obviously this is just silly numbers. So, but I think it shows very well what has happened. It's something like that. So the lies have been increasing like this, pretty much in a linear manner. And the same thing was happening very slowly with those fighting against it. And then from the 1800s, this has happened. Actually, it would have been, if this was any representative of the truth, it would probably be still very, very steep down here, down here. And then when we get to the internet, it just went boom. Okay. But it is still, I think it shows very clearly like what is happening. And in case that you are wondering, that's where you are right now. Okay. That's why now every single lie that comes up from the Islamic world, it gets debunked immediately. Years ago, it took time. You may have heard from people like David Wood saying, in the past, we would say something like about Aisha, and we would be told that we are lying, and they would tell to Muslims not to listen to us, and it would take years for Muslims to realize that we were telling the truth and the Dawah and this were lying. And then, of course, they have to change the narrative. And then they go, no, of course, it's true and we're proud of it. Those sort of things, right? So now it doesn't really matter. Any lie comes up, is like it gets debunked. Preservation, debunked. The whole mess with the siras, with the tafsir, debunked. So we're here. Now, no lie actually gets created and survives. Is quite the opposite. And now it's not just a few people like before, like the first Orientalist. Now is literally everybody with a computer screen. Not only that, now we're having problems in the West because of people coming from Islamic countries trying to impose Sharia in the West, which it ain't happening. So because of all of that, this is pretty much now what it is. And in the coming days, actually, so from Monday, I'm going to actually have a number of special shows for Christmas. So for the Christmas period, all the way up to New Year's Eve. And one of them is actually going to tackle like what is going on and why you have heard from Jay Smith and from David Wood, like, oh, next year is going to be crazy. Okay, this graph will kind of show you what it is. We are now at a point where everything is about to blow up, okay, in every single possible way. Well, hopefully not that way. You know what I mean? All right, but that is coming. So, by the way, I hope that actually you watch all of those specials because they have been a lot of fun to record. They are not what I normally do here on the channel, and they're different, hopefully entertaining, fun, and to just do something a little bit different because of Christmas. And anyway, so back to Mahmad or Muhammad. How important is this? Well, from my point of view, very, because everything has to be explored. At the moment, every single manuscript, every single coin, inscription, everything is being explored for the first time. This whole thing, like with any project of investigation, it could be right or it could be wrong, but the job has to be done. That's the whole thing. Now, the why is it that this argument about the name in the Quran being about Jesus was basically almost popularized and then investigated and so on? Is because of the things we've discussed here today. The verses in the Quran, they are not describing the Muhammad of the narrative. In fact, all of the parallels are with Jesus and Christology. Then, once these people realize that, because this is arguments from them sometimes even from over a year ago, the thing that I have sent that had the video from Murad, that is from like 4 years ago. This is not new to them. So they are very well aware that there is problems with these verses, that Muhammad is only mentioned 4 times and it seems to be about Jesus. So then knowing that is when you get to thinking, okay, so if that's Jesus, how could it be Jesus? And there are many different explanations, okay, or possibilities. Maybe actually at one point it said Jesus, but when we got to the canonization from Uthman or probably Al Hajjaj, who was probably the actual Uthman, maybe they went there and said, no, remove Jesus from here and put the guy that we are inventing, which was probably Umar. So anyway, that maybe it was a sort of interpolation. Maybe they actually just changed the name. Maybe they added those verses later at the time of canonization. And because they destroyed everything that was there before, there was another versions of the Quran from before that time. We don't have them. All of those were destroyed. That's also possible. It is possible that it is simply, well, an interpolation. What else could it be? The that it really was in a different language. For example, and there is just so much on this. For example, we have the verse, I think Surah 9, verse 30, that says the Jews say Ezra is the son of God, and the Christians say the Messiah is the son of God. Well, we have a problem with that expression already, because you have two sentences that should be read as a parallel, where you have the Jews say Ezra is the son of God. The next sentence should read, the Christians say Jesus is the son of God. You should have a name for a name, but that's not what we have. We have Ezra on the one hand, a name, and then we have a title on the other. And yes, sure, you can explain it away and or try to explain it away and say, oh yeah, because they did think that Ezra the scribe was that. And why did they say the Messiah? The Christians say the Messiah is the Son of God. Why are they not saying Jesus, the Son of God? Those things are important. Is it possible that both of them were titles, but in the Proto-Quran, which we now don't have and we are never going to have, they were both of them titles, and during the canonization, one of them was transformed into a name. Basically, they didn't put a definite article, and the other one, they put the definite article. We don't know, but these things have to be explored. And I find it particularly annoying when people actually hear things like that and they go, no, 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 the Quran is what we've always had, and that's that. And it's like, well, that's nonsense. That's absolute nonsense of the greatest, nonsense. Because we have the Mukataat. We have 29 verses, 29 surahs in the Quran that begin with letters that nobody knows the meaning of. It's like, okay, so very simple. When this was written, they had meaning. And then, by the time it was canonized, the meaning was lost. So we are missing the early history of the Quran. There are verses that they seem to be interpolated, right? Like we all know this, it's not a mystery. The problem is that when we go to the oldest manuscript that we have, we don't find those verses missing. So they really break the patterns. There will be many sections in the Quran that the patterns are broken, the rhythm goes, and things like that. And if they were actually inserted late, they were still inserted way before the canonization. So we're talking about many different Qurans just being created, added on, removed, and then we got the canonization, but that's the one that we have. And as you can imagine, it is impossible to recreate an original text when we actually don't have the original text. Even according to their traditions, the Quran used to be much larger, which is probably a memory of what it was. We know there were problems, so now we have to work with what we've got. As easy as it would be for me to go through some verses and see, oh, look, in here they have removed a couple of verses because they wanted to hide the father or the son or something like that. It's like I would be speaking nonsense because it can never be proven, right? Unless we find a manuscript, and we're not gonna, because if they ever appeared, they were immediately destroyed or they are in a vault somewhere, okay? If there were any other versions of the Quran, they're not gonna appear. Well, unless Islam ends and then we find in an excavation site or something, okay? But let's not hold our breath and keep getting the job done. So we looked at the verses, and the verses are very much descriptive of Jesus. They are not only the Muhammad verses, they're all of the other ones that we have discussed. Okay, so that's how this argument begins. We know it's Jesus. Did anyone ever call Jesus Muhammad? It's like, according to our sources, no, it's never happened. Okay, it's like, but the Quran is saying that. Actually, the Quran is the source. The Quran says that that name that appears in those verses is Jesus. So we do have a source from the 7th century that confirms that. Now, how you read it, that's a different matter. But if they find that link, or let's put it this way, at the moment, much no, actually, I will not go down that rabbit hole. So if it was proven in a way that people will go, oh wow, yes, that's how it was read, because otherwise they would have added a gua to do the u sound or whatever. If that's then proven, what people then will see is that MHMD was Jesus, right? That will be the conclusion, that it was not this Arabic name, but it was a Hebrew something. As I said, I don't care, call it adjective, title, whatever it is. And it would certainly help. But think about it. We have already looked at the verses. The verses are already clear. Now we have a 7th century source that mentions Muhammad, Mahmad, Mahmud, whatever you want to call it, and they describe Jesus. We have, as I mentioned before, an inscription end of the 7th century that says, oh, please, Muhammad or Mahmad. At that point, they don't have the Dhammas and things like that, of course. Please, Muhammad, intercede for us. It's like, okay, that's Jesus. Like, why would you say that about any other man, even if it was Umar or Abdul Malik or somebody else? Certainly not a guy without miracles. So, and then in the coins, and then we have this coin of Abdul Malik, which it's always been understood as Abdul Malik with a flaming sword, but that is mystical. Why would he actually have an image of him with a flaming sword? It actually makes more sense that that was an image of the angel of the Lord. So he was making that transition away from Christianity and creating his own things. But all of those things have to be explored. So like this, we can actually get some clarity. At the moment, it does look like the original invention, it came from Jesus. How we got from Jesus to the name Muhammad? Well, this Mahmad thing may be an important clue. The definite articles, you have heard that one probably quite a bit. Oh, but it's not a title, because if it was the praise one, it would say Al Muhammad, right? I'm Muhammad, as opposed to Muhammad. Right. That's great. But we don't even know how these things were written to begin with. That's why I've mentioned the whole thing with Ezra. If we were able to prove that instead of Ezra, the name was Aziz, and that in the original text would have said something like, the Jews says that the mighty one, that the Almighty, is the Son of God, or the dear one. It depends if it's Syriac or not. And the Christians say the Messiah is the Son of God. It's like, okay, now we have two different titles in here, and the sentences are in parallel. When they transformed this into Arabic, one of them dropped the definite article and another one retained it. Then something similar could have happened with Muhammad. But in order to do that, it would require people to really do basically magical stuff. But in any case, so there are many disciplines in this research to do with Islam. For example, you have Daniel Brubaker, whose skills are different to Shadi Nasser's. Both of them, they're doing incredible work, very, very important stuff, but they have two different disciplines. So you wouldn't expect one to be doing what the other one is doing. They're exploring two very different things, and great. And we have people looking at things like linguistics and things to do with the history. There are archaeological findings that are happening, they are coming out of Saudi Arabia quite regularly now. Okay, so there will be all of these different things that have to come together. So things like that, like how do you read the name, that's something that certainly has to be explored. Everything has to be explored. Now, it turns out it's not Mahmad and it was Muhammad. Oh, does that mean the whole thing collapses? It wasn't Jesus. It's like, absolutely not. We've looked at the verses. Basically, we already know the punchline. Okay, that name in there, whether it was a title and something happened with it, whether it was replaced or whether it was read in one way or another, it was always about Jesus. Now, what would strengthen all of that case seeing this clearly with the Quran, although I hope today I have done a good job at showing all of these parallels to show that it is Jesus, the more stuff that we find when it comes to do with Muhammad, the better. Another thing, for example, you have heard that one of the titles used for Muhammad is supposed to be Mahmad with a T instead of with a D. And people are wrestling over that. That's the spelling from Persia. But what is Muhammad then doing up there? You know, he shouldn't be there, and all of those things. It's like, are you sure? Are you really sure that the spelling Mahmad is the same as Mahmad? Or maybe it's actually a different name altogether, a different title altogether. Mm? So maybe, yeah, it's the same, but those are the things that there will be the correct experts exploring. And everybody has to do their bits. Now, just like I say, for me, my gut feeling is that the Mahmad thing is going to end up being right. Proving it, it might actually be a number of having the numbers. Maybe this is not, maybe for people to accept that argument, first, the world needs to accept that Muhammad didn't exist. And then they get to, okay, so how did that name make it into the book? Oh, here we have these explanations. It came from those traditions. And then they accept it. Maybe we already have all of the answers. Maybe this argument is correct and we already have all of the answers. But for as long as people say, no, Muhammad was a real guy, no one is looking for answers. Very similar to the conversation that I had with Callum from Titans TV. So we did it on his channel, and then we've also uploaded it here. So make sure that you watch it if you haven't. The reason I wanted to speak with him is because I think Callum is ahead of the curve a little bit, because his thesis is about how they created the stories of Muhammad, who was the blueprint. And I think his thesis is incredibly strong. The problem is that people are one step back, still fighting Muhammad did exist. He was a false prophet and he was there in Mecca. So that's why he's kind of like there in the shadows, just waiting. Mm? But once the more and more people realizes the that Muhammad didn't exist, the next question is, how did they create the narrative? Where did it come from? And at that point, Callum will be there waiting, saying, "Guys, I've tried to tell you. Look at this. It's even from the right region, right?" So I think he's just like ahead of the curve and just waiting as more people realize. But maybe that's the point, that we have to first demonstrate that Muhammad didn't exist, so that people can look at other explanations with an open mind. At the moment, they're just shutting down uh, every single possibility because they've concluded that Muhammad existed. So it doesn't really matter if you say Mahmad, no, you are speaking nonsense because Muhammad. And Kalam's thesis about the Abyssinian kingdom, well, that's nonsense because Muhammad. And he's like, okay, so maybe we just need to prove that he didn't exist. And then the next question will be, how did these things happen? And it's very likely that then at that point, these things are just picked up then by great numbers, not of skeptics, but people who are just ready to find answers and go, okay, so that's why the coins, early coins, would have MHMD, and it still had nothing to do with a guy who doesn't appear in his book, who had no traditions, who people would not have followed, because he didn't just appear out of nowhere, talk to people, and then, oh yeah, let's believe this guy. I mean, he had no miracles whatsoever. He has a book that he's not writing down, and he's getting all of the stories wrong. But yeah, I'm going to abandon my Jewish faith or my Christian faith, which my family has had for generations, because this guy told me, trust me, bro. And 1 + 1 + 1 equals 3, equals 1, right? It's like, you see the problem? It's like these things couldn't have happened, that a guy appears and people start believing in him. By the sword, yes, but successors would not have done that. Anyway, we're going to talk over the Christmas period as well about the narrative, some problems with the narrative and stuff. And in any case, so I will continue in the channel to generally use the term Muhammad because you guys know who I'm talking about. I will be going through verses in the Quran. So if I say Muhammad, that's the guy I'm trying to debunk. And that is, well, I am trying. I think I've debunked already with tens and tens and tens and tens and tens of verses. Is that guy, is the guy in the narrative, the guy who was doing things. I'm looking at the Quran and seeing that the messenger was that those verses were talking about Jesus again and again and again and again, and the Spirit and Moses and stuff. So instead of confusing things and ever mentioning Mahmad, and then having people say, "Oh, but what do you mean by that?" I will just say Muhammad. Everyone will understand that. But I really hope that the Mahmad argument happens to be correct. It certainly fits what I can see that there is a problem even with those verses in terms of linguistics and how you read them. Je ne sais pas. It's not my area of expertise, but I really hope that that argument is 100% correct, and in the end, it will be completely proven, accepted. It makes it into the history books, and all of that good stuff. So, is this like important? Yes, or at least certainly that's my take on it. People who think no, that's not important, that's fine. Don't investigate it. You know, lots of people are doing whatever they can to actually try and help our Muslim brothers and sisters, and we do it with whatever skills we have. If I was a linguist, I would probably be looking at this or other stuff, but I'm not. So I can at least look at the Quran and look at context and analyze things very literally, and look at maps and use the skills that I have to try and contribute. But the people who actually think in these terms is like, yeah, explore that. I really hope that we find more and more links and that this happens to be right. But what I think we can conclude now is that more people will believe in that once they stop believing the lie that the Muhammad of the narrative existed, that he was an absolutely obvious false prophet. They wrote all of those things down, and now in the 21st century, when Muslims are shown what Muhammad was like, they leave Islam. It's like, that's silly. Everybody around him they would have known. So the story is a fabrication because it just has too many holes in it. It doesn't actually make any sense. But anyway, let's see actually what the next year brings. I really hope that this will actually be sorted, or that more evidence is coming out. For now, the one thing that I would like to actually see more is on the coins, because the region had been quite Christian. So I'm certainly not convinced that when they write MHMD on the coins and when it appears in the Shahada, that they mean this guy, the guy in the traditions. I'm not really sure. I think there is a bigger chance, better chance, that when they wrote those things down, they still had in mind Jesus, and then it actually morphed and evolved and changed one step at a time, or things like that. I think that's probably more likely. But anyway, so I hope you have enjoyed this discussion on the Muhammad or Mahmad verses. Is not one that I like to do. Lots of people have been asking me to do this one for a while. And the reason I don't like to do this one is because, as you will probably likely to see, um, any reaction would be, oh no, it says it's Muhammad, is that's our guy, it's the guy in the narrative. Okay, that's how it is shut down. I find it a lot easier to show the other verses that we have been discussing, 9 Surah 9 verse 31, and the verses that say that Jesus died and things like that, because you just have to cope hard. The verses are not talking about Muhammad in any possible way. He's not mentioned by name, so they cannot point and say, look, it says Muhammad, so that's Muhammad, that's it, stop talking about it. If you point at a verse that talks about a messenger, and then you show that it is Jesus being described, then you can say, but you're reading Muhammad in a verse that is describing Jesus. So you see, it's a lot easier. When you go to Muhammad, it upsets people, it creates more of a visceral response, and they just would point at the thing and say, but you say if it was a title, it's like, I don't care what it was read, or how it made it into the book, but I can read the context. And I know full well that it doesn't match the Muhammad of the narrative to insert his name only 4 times, 2 of them in the past tense, and all of them being very Christological. So let me know if you enjoyed this. If sorry for not discussing Surah 48, verse 29. That one is a lot of work. It requires lots of other verses. So that one will probably not be, well, certainly until next year, but probably for a while. So for now, I think the next episodes that we'll have here on the channel will be what is going to be Christmas specials. So let me see if I can actually just tell you roughly what we're going to. So yes, I've got it. Oh, I think I've got it. Wait, is it going to work? Yeah, okay. So for during the Christmas period, then what we're going to have is this plus one more that I'm actually just working on at the moment. We will be discussing, well, the holes in the narrative, but with a twist. So we're not going to be talking about the problems with the standard Islamic narrative to a degree, because we all know all of those problems. We're going to talk about the narrative itself, like why do we have problems with Muhammad being the guy that everybody followed when we read the hadiths and nobody would have followed him. So a narrative discussion. Then on Christmas Eve, we are having a special episode with Odon and with John. It was a lot of fun to record. We actually showed a few things that we've never shown here on the channel. So make sure that you catch that one, if not on Christmas Eve, because depending on where you live, it's probably not going to be very convenient, but it will be there on the channel. So make sure that you actually give it a watch when you have the opportunity. I'm also reviewing one movie. There is an animation movie about Muhammad. So that was a lot of fun to research and to record. So hopefully we will see you on that one. And if you didn't know that there is an animation movie about Muhammad, don't watch it. Make sure that you watch the review first and then you watch the movie, because like this, you will keep an eye out for some of the things that I noticed that were absolutely hilarious. And then we will end the year with a very brief show. So on the 31st, which is Thanksgiving for some of the people that have actually been helping here on the channel and popping over and so on. And also explain very briefly some of the things that are going to happen next year, inshallah. But anyway, so I hope to see you on those when they drop. And I hope you have enjoyed this particular video. Let me know your comments in the comment section below. Any other verses that you have noticed that they have to be addressed. Anything in the verses that we've discussed that you've noticed, maybe in 48:29, let me know. It would certainly help me a lot, and hopefully everybody watching as well. So for now, I will let you go. It's been a pleasure having you all over. I hope that you liked, shared, subscribed, done all of those wonderful things, which really, really help. And that's it from me. Have a lovely rest of your week, and God bless you all. See you soon. Bye-bye.
There is only one Quran, right? Every Quran in the world is the same. That's what you've been told. You have been told a lie!
That 26 off the Quran.
26 different Qurans!
There are 0 Dawa guys apparently left on the planet who are willing to defend Muhammad in a debate.
Everybody can go and read it. This is a book full of mistakes in Arabic, in the grammar, in the spelling, in the pronunciation.
Whoever wrote the Quran made an error because they didn't quite understand what was written in the 7th century in the Torah and the Injil.
Stay away from these translations. They are propaganda.
We know that stories about Muhammad were made up on an industrial scale.
What in the world is this NGO.